My name is Brandon Caves, and I attend here at Gray Methodist. And my daughter Shelby Caves is in the youth here at the church. And I've been involved in construction mission trips for a long time, but this is my first mission trip that I have done that really impacted me like this. So as soon as I found out about it, um, I told Shelby that it would be good for her and I to kind of go on this together so that we could kind of bond and grow spiritually together on this. And I knew that this would be a good time for us. So we started making plans as soon as we found out that the mission trip was planned. We started making plans to go, and we both got like the Duolingo app and started practicing our Spanish. So that kind of went on for a few weeks, and quickly I kind of got pushed to the back burner, and I just life happened, and we're working and everything, and so I'm in the back of my mind. I know I should be practicing my Spanish because I'm worried that, hey, how am I going to um, preach the gospel or share the gospel with somebody that can't speak English? So I kind of had that in the back of my mind, but really Spanish got pushed to the back burner. And so as the trip approached, I became more and more apprehensive about traveling to Mexico. We had a lot of things going on in the news, civil unrest between Mexicans and Americans, and I was just kind of worried. I'd never been out of the country before on a mission trip, and so I was just kind of scared, if that makes sense. And but by that point, we had kind of passed the point of no return, so we were all in, and I didn't want to kind of overreact because I know that things are in the news are somewhat not reality sometimes. So we just continued on. Finally, the day approached when we were getting ready to go. We showed up here at the church, and everybody prayed with us, and we headed out to Atlanta. Flew into San Diego. Got to San Diego, and we got some vans and started to cross the border. And as we crossed the border, as soon as we crossed the border, it became evident that the poverty was just immense. You could go into you could go into Tijuana, is where we came into, and you could see Tijuana with the buildings crumbling and homeless people everywhere, and you could still see the U.S. over there. And it just made me think that it reminded me how blessed we are to be living in the U.S. And I literally saw a guy that had dug a hole up under the road, and he was living in that hole, and he had his things around this hole. This was in Tijuana. And again, I can look over here and see all these nice buildings in the U.S., and here's just poverty and sewage everywhere in Tijuana. It was terrible. Actually, we didn't spend any time in Tijuana. We just drove through, went on down to Ensenada. On the way down, we stopped at a kind of a scenic overview place, and I mean, it looked like a resort town. You would think that we were somewhere on an all-inclusive resort. It was a rest area actually, and we stopped in there to use the bathroom. It became pretty evident that it was not a resort town when we go in and we see that the plumbing fixtures have no water connected to them at all. So there's a guy with huge water containers and a 5-gallon bucket, and every few minutes he takes the 5-gallon bucket and he goes around and flushes all the toilets. And there was a table as you walk in the bathroom with a roll of toilet paper and a sign that said 10 pesos. So you had to buy your own toilet paper there, and so that was different. And I immediately realized, hey, they don't have the same things we do. I mean, their infrastructure, plumbing, and water situation is pretty bad. So we traveled on down into Ensenada. We got there to Hugo Ministries, and we started meeting the people that we were going to be working with. But we also met our family. One of the families was there, Rutilio, I think is the way you pronounce his name, and his wife, Bonifacia. They were there, and they could speak zero English. Matter of fact, they could barely speak Spanish, I think. They were, like I said, from a very remote place in South Mexico where I think they speak a tribal language. So even the interpreters that we had with us had a hard time communicating with them. So then again, I'm thinking, how are we gonna preach the gospel to these people? You're ever going to build them a house, but how are we going to communicate with them to tell them that Christ loves them? I didn't know what we were going to do. So I quickly found out the answer to that, and we started talking to the people at UGO, and they had a presentation and a welcome kind of thing, and they said, hey, we team with local churches, and these local churches go out and find people in need in the area that are in need of physical things, but also in need of spiritual things, people that need to know about the Lord. And they preach the gospel to these people, and a lot of them become Christians. And then UGO steps in to meet the physical need of, hey, these people need a home, these people need water to drink, these people need clothes to wear, and these people need food to eat. And so that's the way it all kind of works. And so that made me feel better about not being able to communicate with these people, because the pre-work had already been done. So we started off our first day. We traveled to the job site, which was outside of Ensenada, and the roads were pretty terrible. We got off of the paved road and got onto some dirt roads. Actually, there's just one paved road, main road. Everything else is dirt. And when I say dirt, it's not like where the road scraper has been and made it smooth. This is very rocky. So we got to the area where we were working, and it was Rotilio and Bonifacia's land, which was probably 150 feet by 150 feet. And they had a home built out of scrap wood and plastic. And they had an outhouse that was made out of wood. So that was better than some of the outhouses I saw. I saw some that were just made out of plastic. So they bought this land. It was all they could afford, and that's where they were living. They had a dirt floor, mattresses thrown down in the dirt. When it rained, it was obviously mud, and when it was dry, it was dust. There was dust that literally covered everything. It looked like you were stepping back in time into the 1920s maybe. It was amazing to see what little they had. And we started work. They had the slab was there ready for us. Construction materials were ready. We started work, and Rotilio was there, but I could kind of sense that Rotilio was not really comfortable with us. Even though we couldn't talk to him, I could just kind of sense that he didn't really understand why all of these people were here to help him, and maybe even we wanted something from him. But it didn't take but about a day, and I think Rotilio started to feel the love of Christ that we were able to share by serving to build him a home. So the second day, Rotilio he's working hand in hand with us, and he doesn't know much about construction because he's a field worker, but he's driving nails, he's using the nail gun, he's doing anything he can to help us. And there was a huge language barrier, but we were able to communicate just enough, and became friends with Rotilio and his family. He had 3 children, and the kids were just great kids, and they had a great time, and we got to play with them some. That was really fun. So it took us 3 days to build the house, and the whole time I'm thinking, well, not the whole time, but like the first day I'm thinking, this house is not up to building code where I'm from. We have 2x4 walls with the studs on 24-inch centers, and we have 2x4 rafters, and I'm thinking, how long is this stuff going to last? I'm just not used to building stuff that way. And so that's kind of bothering me a little bit. I'm wondering why we couldn't go the extra mile and do 2x6 rafters and 16-inch center stud walls. And after about a day, I had to humble myself. I became humbled and I was just reminded that Rotilio is sleeping on a mattress on a dirt floor. He has no dishes. He has no cabinets. He has an outhouse. He has no running water. There is no running water. Potable or non-potable, there's nothing. And so I quickly became humbled, and as the house came together, it ended up being really nice, and I know it's something that he was very proud of. Him and his family were extremely proud of. The whole water situation there, I forgot to mention that. when we first got to Yugo, they had drinking water, but they had it labeled, hey, this is drinking water. Other than that, the water that was piped in was saline water from the ocean, and they had it nice. Yugo Ministries had like the nicest of the nice. Nobody else really has that. A few other people I talked to, they said they had some running water, but it was not potable. So I don't know how Yugo had the potable water, but somehow they got it. The water situation was so dire that every day when we would take our 10-gallon water container and we were ready to take it back, we would offer them the water, and they would have to scrounge around to try to find containers to put the water in. Sometimes they had a Coke bottle and they might put some in there. Sometimes they didn't have anything. But we were careful not to pour our water out in front of them because it would have been extremely disrespectful to do that. So yeah, that really reminded me of how we're so blessed, and we know that we're blessed, but we don't think about the things that are essential to life, like water. You can't live without water. And Rotilio and his family, they have to buy their water in 5-gallon containers, and it costs about half a day's wages for a 5-gallon container of water that lasts them 2 or 3 days. So water is a huge deal over there. Took us 3 or 4 days to complete the house. We started work on Monday. By Wednesday, it was mostly complete. We went to a church service on Wednesday night at Rotilio and Bonifacia's church. Had a great time. We sang some songs in Spanish, and we had an interpreter to help us with the service, and just had a great time there. The pastor at the church, it was a lady. She preached out of Matthew 25. I'm going to just read that real quick. Matthew 25:31. This is talking about the judgment when Christ comes back to judge the world. But when the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, then he will sit on his glorious throne. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate them from one another as a shepherd separates them from the sheep, separates the sheep from the goats. And he will put the sheep on his right and the goats on the left. And the king will say to those on his right, come, you who are blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. Naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me. Then the righteous will answer him, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? And when did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or naked and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and come to you? And she reminded us that when that day happens, that we'll be the ones on the right. And God will remind us that we took the time to feed Rotilio and his family and to help him by building him a home. And by doing that to Rotilio and his family, we did that to the Lord. So that was pretty impactful. As we began to come out of the church that night, we we walked around some of the areas around the church, and we saw some of the buildings that the church had for youth. And I kind of began, at that point, I began to feel a little safer because by that point we had been all around Ensenada, and we were walking around at nighttime in this town, and there's people walking everywhere, and I just began to realize that, hey, this place is not nearly as dangerous as what I thought initially. And the media, I think, hypes that up a lot. Obviously, there probably are some areas where you get into trouble if you were looking for it, but nothing that made any of us feel unsafe. So on Thursday, we were able to present the home to Rotilio and his family. We had a key, and we were going to give him the key. And so we made this big circle, and we all passed the key around. And as we passed the key around, we just spoke whatever was on our heart. Excuse me. And we had an interpreter to help us. And as the key came around to me, I thought about the verse that I have written in some concrete at my house that says, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And so I just told Rutilio and his family that that's my prayer for them, that they have a home now, and I pray that they will continue to serve the Lord and to do the Lord's work. So after that, we went back to Hugo Ministries and started preparing for the trip back home on Friday. We traveled on Friday back through Tijuana, again, saw a lot of poverty there, and got into San Diego. And one thing that happened in San Diego that I wasn't expecting was that we were just kind of going around in this village, and there was a fishing pier. And I just walked down on the pier, Shelby and I did, and we got out there, and there was this old guy fishing, and he says, "Well, what are you doing here? Where are you from?" And I said, "Well, we're from Georgia, and we've been in Mexico doing a mission trip." And so he started asking about what we were doing, and I explained to him what we did, and I just felt it on my heart that I should ask the guy if he knows the Lord, and I did. I said, "How about you?" I said, "Do you know the Lord?" And most of the time when you ask somebody that, especially around here, they'll say, "Yeah." But this guy said no. He said, "I don't know him at all." He said, "I've never read the Bible. I don't know anything." And so I'd never really had an opportunity quite like that where somebody didn't know anything. And so I started to talk to him in what little bit of time I had and try to share the gospel best I could with somebody that knows absolutely nothing. And I asked him if he needed prayer for anything, and he said they had a gambling addiction. So Shelby and I got to pray for him, and that was it. He said that he wasn't ready to accept Christ, but I'm hopeful that I planted a seed, and so that was a really neat experience. And I'll continue to pray for him. His name was Roy. So we traveled on back to the hotel, got some rest, and flew back the next day to Atlanta. And I was just so thankful that I got to go. After I had experienced this trip, it was much different than any of the other construction mission trips that I've ever done. I've done lots of them, but this one impacted me more because I saw the true poverty that's out there. I've worked in some of the most poor areas of the U.S., like East Tennessee, but I haven't seen any poverty like I saw in Mexico. And so I feel like Shelby and I were able to grow closer together during this time, and then also we grew spiritually together, and I think we learned what it means to be a true disciple of Christ.
Okay.
Yep. So when we arrived at Hugo, we kind of realized the bathroom situation. We had about 3 bathrooms for 40 people, and they told us immediately you can't flush the toilet paper. And so I don't think any of our group did, but pretty quickly 2 of the bathrooms got clogged. And I think it was probably from the group ahead of us that had been there before us. So we're down to 1 bathroom, for 40 people. And there were a couple of bathrooms that were across the street, but you may or may not get in those either. And we were eating spicy food all week. So 1 bathroom amongst 40 people with a lot of jalapenos was not good. But I was really impressed with our youth, how they never complained. They never complained about the work situation. They never complained about the bathroom situation. They never complained about the water situation. And even on the job site, we only had a porta-john and an outhouse. I didn't hear any of the kids, or I didn't hear anybody complain about anything. It was very amazing to see that. And then our kids, they gave their testimony at church that Wednesday when we went to the Hispanic church, and they did an awesome job. I was very proud of them.